Okay, welcome to Art Worlds. This is the ragtag group that decided to carry on without the facilitator. This is full on hijacked uh, anarchy. So welcome. I'm presenting. And gonna try and just stay cool.
You're not sharing your screen, by the way.
Oh yeah, I'm doing it. Okay. Okay. You see like mostly a picture
We
that's like
we see the top, but we see the entire slide, so I think it's fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Cool. And gonna just do a test here since the last time I did a presentation the slides were all fucked up when I tried to switch them. That worked.
Yeah.
Okay, you now see LOL.
Yes.
And here you see Adult Swim.
Yes.
Okay. Welcome to this presentation of mine. This, as you may be familiar with, is the logo for Adult Swim. It says Adult Swim. Lol. Here's the Adult Swim mission statement. They did it as a bump one time. Um, yeah, they used to like to write little manifestos and things to people to make it feel like they were speaking to you in a clandestine way. And it kind of felt like um I had a parasocial relationship when I was watching these messages, like, but just with a mysterious shadow figure. And I don't know, just thought I would say that. Here is a timeline that I think is very historical and important. uh it's like they started out, they developed, and then they got stupid, and then they got here. The advent of Rick and Morty. Boom! That's what my show is all about. Boom! Hello, welcome to the Rick and Morty show. You're gonna hear it. It's all of my Rick and Morty knowledge. Rick and Morty 100 years, Rick and Morty forever, rickandmorty.com. It's happening. And we're gonna start at the beginning. So, welcome. Um, okay, so before any of the Rick and Morty cartoons appeared in any sort of way that you could see them, there were a bunch of comedians, movie makers, animators that were working on Channel 101. And I wanted to start the story here because I want to try to do an arc about like how their art developed, how they sort of like snowballed into a phenomena, and like how that phenomena like broke into all these different channels of like other projects. So there's gonna be a lot of stuff that I can't get to because there were so many showrunners and so many actors. There's just so much like talent that crosses this like group of people that it was just like, oh, I can't cover it all. It really is a lot. But here's the start. Channel 101 happened like before YouTube. And it was this film festival where a bunch of people want to, get together and just make shit. And there were people who were like getting fired from jobs, like people who couldn't find work and were just bumming around in Los Angeles and then later in New York, and people who just wanted a shot to make people laugh. So the creatives, of course, who were credited with starting it is Dan Harmon and Rob Schraub. They started um, roughly around like 2003 uh, to make this festival, and it initially was called Super Midnight Movie Show, and they were like just playing in their living rooms, whatever they would make. And their first project was to guess what happens in Jaws 4. So that was it. They were like, all right, let's try to make this thing. What happens in Jaws 4? And I'm sure it's going to be great because we just got our first pilot rejected, which was Heat Vision Jack, which starred Jack Black, um, and a talking motorcycle. Uh, so yeah, they were like, well, our brilliant idea failed. Let's just make some stupid thing about another thing that's also stupid because this is our culture. um, but it quickly evolved from the Jaws 4 period of time to like House of Cosby's era and like uh this other cartoon called Doc and Marty, which these are like Justin Roiland creations. So he sort of was like around in these very early days of people like forming this community. But before I get into that, I wanted to read their statement from their website because I think it's like a really beautiful artist statement. And sorry, I'm like on this slide for so long. Anyway. For the audiences that attend the live screenings, Channel 101 is a chance to sit in the worn-out chair of the fat network exec, drunk on the blood of lowly artists whose right to exist is given in exchange for their ability to nourish. If there are 10 shows in the screening and 7 of them are good, that means 2 good shows aren't coming back, and the power of life and death is in your hands. Base your decision on whatever you want, you run the network, you pick the programming, then come back in a month and see the next episodes of the shows you picked, plus a healthy crop of new pilots. Dump the whole lineup and start fresh, or keep your favorite show running all year. Unlike real television, at Channel 101, what you want is what you get more of. And the day you stop wanting something is the day it stops. For creatives that participate, Channel 101 is where the rubber meets the road. The deadlines are unreasonable, the time limit is impossible, the pay is non existent, and the judgment is blunt. The amount of ego and sense of entitlement with which you enter is exactly proportional to the amount of pain you'll experience before you leave. Channel 101 is where you learn 3 things: how to fail, how to succeed, and finally, how there is no difference between the two. After all, the only thing as bad as being told your pilot failed is being told that your 3rd episode was worse than your 2nd. And the only thing as good as having the #1 show is having a chance to come back with something new. In the meantime, you become harder, faster, and fearless. You surrender to the audience as life-giving God and acquire total creative freedom through that surrender. You make connections with fellow creatives, you have something to look forward to all the time, and for a few shining moments here and there, you're in the zone and your life takes on a little meaning. So yeah, from that really intense manifesto, Justin Roiland shows up and he's like way younger than everybody else, and he drops House of Cosby's, which was the first show to be ranked #1 at 3 screenings in a row, from their like brutal voting campaigns. And it was like so good that it ended up kind of going viral, and then Bill Cosby sent a cease and desist letter, and then they made another episode after that just to be like, fuck you. But also then they stopped. And then after the cancellation, as a response to that cancellation, Roiland made The Real Animated Adventures of Doc and Marty, which was sort of this talk about like intellectual property, like what, like, okay, fine, you don't want me to rip this off, like I'll just rip this off, and like you can't stop me, it's the internet. So yeah, the Adventures of Doc and Marty was extremely like perverse and fucked up, and it mostly was just about like Marty getting tricked into like licking Doc's balls all the time. Anyway, Roiland also did Comic Sacrifice, and this was like the thing that would become his production company. But he basically started just like doing doodles in sketchbooks and like building a library of characters, and yeah, and this like led up to the point of them sort of becoming these animated shorts, and his whole thing was just to be like more brutal and intensely fucked up than anybody. So like his idea was just like um he would create a character, make you care about it, and then kill it. And that was just like the practice for every single thing that he would do. Anyway, this like led up to Acceptable TV, which was the first time that they really got a chance to like air. They were on VH1 throughout 2007, and there were a lot of shows again that were like really great in this lineup, but the one that ended up making it throughout the entire run was Mr. Sprinkles. And Mr. Sprinkles is another Justin Roiland joint. But you know, of course, it's like Dan Harmon and Rob Schraub made the format for Acceptable TV, and there was like a lot of artists that were all just working together. Like, you know, Kumail Nanjiani was in here, like Ryan Ridley, Abed Gaith, like it was a huge milieu. So Mr. Sprinkles, like I have some shots here. He was sort of like a Dr. Seuss character that had lost his meaning because he was put on this planet to entertain and to like teach children about their imagination and like sort of get things going, but kids all just do video games now. So nobody gives a fuck about like this imaginary guy, and they all think he's really creepy for breaking and entering. So he kind of like his life spirals out of control, and then he gets institutionalized, and you know, as he sort of like leaves the norm of society, he just like gets um further and further othered, and he goes on this arc where he like gets in prison after like fucking up at this insane asylum, and then he gets recruited by these like CIA kind of shadowy types, and there's a whole war between imaginary creatures and between normal people. Uh, and of course, Mr. Sprinkles has to sacrifice himself. And before he does, which ultimately ends the series and ends Acceptable TV, he says a speech to his son, Nathaniel, which is, Nathaniel, Daddy has to take a ride. I won't be around to raise you, so I need you to know something before I go. You're special, and this world can be very hard on special things. They'll pick on you, they'll hit you, they'll dump you, diagnose you, and develop you. And there will be days when you wish that everyone was like you, so that everything could be easy. But that's not how they think. They spend every day wishing that everyone was the same. And it's that wish that keeps them from being special. So when they come for you with their knives out, just smile and forgive them, because ordinary things say hello and goodbye, but nothing that special can ever die. And that's a joke. Mr. Sprinkles always has to rhyme. But you can kind of see the sentiment is being developed here, that there is an idea that like if you follow your own path, you will be vilified, and this sort of is like the kernel of like a Rick character, and the way that everybody like hates that sort of archetype of like oh, why would someone be special, like oh, it's so annoying, all of these heroes. And you know, ultimately he is just like a subverted, like malformed hero archetype, like who is sort of like showing at the same time that the idea is really stupid. Um, anyway, that was a big hit. And then Acceptable TV just only lasted 1 year, so boom, they lost their channel again. And Justin Roiland went on to do Grandma's Virginity podcast with Ryan Ridley again, and Jackie Buscarino. And so Jackie Buscarino worked on Steven Universe. And so there was like all these Steven Universe animators, and then they had Pendleton Ward. So all of the Adventure Time people were around, and then they had Kent Osborne and Sarah Silverman, and there was like people who worked on Mr. Show, who were like all around, and of course like Dan Harmon is starting at this point also to become more of like a mentor figure to Justin Roiland. And throughout the run of this podcast, they have a lot of bits, but then they also talk in depth about what it's like to be working on Rick and Morty, and how nobody has any idea what this is going to be. Nobody knows if it's going to make it. They assume because their whole lives have been a failure so far, like that this is also just going to be a failure. And listening to it, it's like, oh, I don't know, we're like working on this script, or like maybe we're going to make it, maybe not. In the meantime, they're just like having a great experience, like coming up with a ton of different characters. And it's like they have bits like Toppy the Topic. He just comes in and says a topic and then goes, why don't you talk about that? um there's like Mr. Bathtub. He's just always talking, but he's in his bathtub. Then there's a bit that's called Pigs Are People, and this was a religion that they developed on the podcast, which was like sort of like this reincarnation cycle where you live your life as a human and you come back as a pig, and then when you die as a pig you come back as a human. And it like destroys the idea that there's anything that outside of that. Like you don't transcend, you don't become Buddha or something. You just become a pig and then a person and then a pig and a person. And the reason why your soul keeps going into a body, according to this religion, is because it's very painful just to be a soul outside of a body. And so your soul just constantly recycles, even though life is like so painful and you'll probably get like eaten or something. You still just like have this incentive to do it because it might be less painful. But then they also had like radio from a space station that was being taken over by aliens. Stuff like it was very cool. I liked it a lot. And then we have in the same time we have Community. So this was like Dan Harmon's major project. He worked a lot on. I don't know. I guess like I feel like he was really into archetypes, and he was really into trying to make these like Shakespearean interactions, and like make a like very classic theater kind of structure to things that was really dialogue driven, and he really got his chops here. But yeah, Community, as you can see, like in the center, it was always plagued by his alcoholism because he was like a tragic. I mean, he still is. He's a horrific alcoholic. Like he's just this crazy, like would just be drinking all the time. Would be like, yeah, I'm totally functional. It's fine. And then there was a Tumblr that all the workers made of him passing out, in different positions in different places around the workplace. And it was just like, okay, that's what he does. This is Community. So he got like fired after a bunch of messed up trouble with Chevy Chase and with the writer Megan Gantz. Megan Gantz says was the one who put the harassment case on him, and he sort of had trouble accepting that. And Chevy Chase was just like another extreme alcoholic personality, so they were just screaming like slurs at each other across crowded gatherings and stuff. Um, and yeah, those were like the really strong fucked up things that was Community. But then I guess the other thing that's sort of interesting to notice about this arc is that he had a rabid fucking fan base. And he was fired like after the third season, but then his Twitter fans were like freaking out about how bad the fourth season was and how messed up the show got. So then he got hired back on for the fifth season. But in the meantime, he started Harmontown, where, as you can see, he is like I went to a couple of Harmontown tapings. I went to one in New York where he drank like a whole fucking bottle of vodka and then just was like spilling shit all over the stage and dancing around in his underwear. And the Gramercy Theater was like, you have to get out now, like your show slot is done. And he was like just too drunk to stop being on stage. In his underwear. It was very demented. He was just like also going through his messy, fucked up divorce. And that was kind of the thing that Harmontown was, is just like everything was out in the open and it was very intense and fucked up, but there wasn't a lot of boundaries. And that's like the very negative side of it. But then the positive side was like, people like Spencer Crittenden got to participate in the show, and he's like a Dungeons and Dragons um like game master of ceremonies. um so like he got to like become something just from going to the shows and being into nerd stuff. uh but yeah, I guess the other side of it that's interesting is this like utopian vision that sort of comes back in, where the original premise of Harmontown began with Harmon and Jeff Davis. Uh, they got together and they wanted to attempt to discuss how to successfully eliminate the flaws of society and create a utopia, which they claimed could be addressed with the creation of a lunar colony in front of an audience. And they really, really strayed far from that at a certain point. But I think it's interesting to note where all of these things start, where it's like, okay, what happens if we have direct democracy with what we make? What happens if we try to imagine a utopia in front of a live audience? And then it ends up like in an alcoholic mess. uh, and speaking of alcoholism and a lot more chaos, we have Dino Samatopoulos, who is another person that. So he was like working with Tim and Eric. He was working on Mr. Show. He was Starburns in Community, and he ended up making a production company, Starburns Industries, that along with like Titmouse and William Street and Solo Card Productions and I don't know, I forgot. I'm sure there's probably more. They all like kind of came together to make Rick and Morty happen, but they're all these like small production houses. And Dino Stamatopoulos, I feel like, is really kind of a just someone you gotta give props to, because he was kind of like also a mentor to Dan Harmon. So it was like, and Dino Stamatopoulos is also like, he has his own podcast, Skull Juice, and he would come on to Harmontown all the time also. But he would be like, he was the kind of mess that where he would just be like telling stories about the time that he was in a dominatrix dungeon, and he was like, that was like, he was a huge pervert, so he couldn't stop talking about kinky sex all the time. Anyway, then you get to Mike Lazo. He's like Mr. Adult Swim, right? So everybody's like running around doing their little shorts, trying to figure out how to make something pop off. And one day Mike Lazo, who is like the William Street guy who started Adult Swim with doing old Space Ghost cartoons, and he was working with Keith Crawford and Andy Merrill, and they developed this company, like, so that they could house all of this stuff, like that they could get Toonami, they could get Aqua Teen, they could get Squidbillies, Birdman, like Space Ghost, Robot Chicken. They got Family Guy from Fox and like, turned it back into a cult phenomenon. Like they were hitting it. They're like star makers. So Mike Lazo calls up famously Dan Harmon and is like, "Hey, do you have a show for me?" And Dan Harmon's like, "No, because I don't make cartoons. I make, you know, syndicated comedies." And so he calls Justin Roiland and is like, "Okay, like, do you have any cartoon ideas?" And he's like, "Yeah, let's do Doc and Marty." So Mike Lazo is like, "Oh, I don't know if it's really gonna work because Morty is such a non-existent personality." And then they rewrite him, and they're on. Okay, so now getting into like kind of the nuts and bolts of the show. A lot of it is um, a lot of the show mechanics hinge on Dan Harmon's analysis of Joseph Campbell, which really is annoying because that just like gave this open door to so many nerd bros to talk about the fucking hero's journey. But knowing that, here it is. I still think it's worth at least like looking at where it crops up and where the references are and what the cornerstone of that philosophy is. So Dan Harmon's story circle is sort of like, okay, you're in this state of maybe equilibrium with your environment. You end up having a desire, you want to go out, you want to make it somewhere, you're changed by your circumstances, you come back and you live as a different person. And in the Rick and Morty universe, they explore this arc like through multiple versions of the characters existing in different realities or different planes or different uh yeah, I don't know, dimensions. Um and it always sort of has this comic like, it's just everyone is going through this all the time. It's not just that there's one set of heroes and you have to experience them. It's like they're one of an infinite number of other ones that are just like them with maybe some minor differences. And even though they have this thing about being special, they also have this thing about being absolutely the same as everything. Um, so, oh yeah, this like also, I guess this like analysis of mythology and of like the story circle itself is it's like connected to how myths evolve into like like, how do I say it? Okay, it's like myths are used to bludgeon people into having the right morals when they're like created from a top down structure. And this analysis of like Hero with a Thousand Faces kind of oh, everyone is going through a journey is sort of like trying to return to a working class understanding of what it means to be a hero or like what it means to go on these adventures. And it's not about like, oh, look at this perfect god who's doing everything the right way. It's like, oh, look at how flawed and look at how alcoholic and look at how stupid and look at how gross these people are, but they're still doing something that's really relatable. um yeah, so I think like, they try to get back to that a lot with the idea of like maybe an adventure just happening because Morty wants to go out with Jessica. And it gets so blown out of proportion and then returns back to the same place. Uh, but then they go through a few seasons of this, like, and they still do this pattern of like, okay, they go out, they come back. Um, and they broke this form and sort of like did this self-examination with the story train episode, which was kind of interesting because it was like the season where um like COVID was really kind of, people thought maybe we were going to be in a lockdown and everyone called it a lockdown, but nobody was really locked down. And they had this story train episode where they referenced it like, oh, why don't you go out and buy another story train because no one's buying shit because of this pandemic, and our economy is falling the fuck apart. Uh, and it's sort of funny on a few levels of like breaking the fourth wall, but also of like examining the position that they're in because they're like being asked to do a lot of product placements and stuff. So they're like, oh, well, we've already been selling Pringles to people. Like, let's sell this bullshit story train, which is what we've been doing the whole time. Um, anyway, then I guess like a sort of like the themes that the show goes through, I think, are also very relatable for people that see themselves like in a decline or like see a loss of potential, or they feel like they can maybe like I'm smart enough to do something, but why am I fucking stuck here? Like, I'm smart enough to have a good life. I'm strong enough to have a good life. I can have a good life. I believe in myself, and yet I'm stuck in a system that just thinks that I need to actually go to therapy, or thinks that like I'm not looking at the right things, or I'm not going in the right direction. Um so I mean that kind of came to a very obvious arc in like the Pickle Rick episode. Was just like really discussing like, oh look, I can literally turn myself into whatever like I want, even though I turned myself into a pickle, which is a problem. um I'm still living and I'm still trying and I'm still like struggling, and I think that like, you know the struggle to rise above, to focus on science, is like something that really keeps coming back for fans. And then also on the other side is like, you don't want to be the robot that just passes butter. Um, yeah, there's just these little reminders of like what your agency is and what you're able to do, and you know how far an individual can take their adventure. Okay, and then there sort of is like I like their discussion about normativity that comes out. That's like, I think Jerry Smith is like the agent of normativity here, and it's really like he's always striving to the most mediocre ends, as evidenced in the Hungry for Apples campaign. Like he just really can't even conceive of being creative, and yet wants everyone to respect him. Just like really wants it, is totally crushed that he doesn't ever get it. um, but then there's also this look at like, the darker tropes of normativity, of being like stuck in capitalism. And I appreciate their jokes about like the flubel crank, um, which is like the idea that you are just pressing pedals to make energy for someone who's extracting value from your labor. Um, there's also like a lot of scenery of like the working ricks in the Citadel of Ricks are like all geniuses in their own right, supposedly, but because of the social structure, they're stuck like doing menial labor. And then there's sort of little, yeah, I don't know, jokes about it. Like, what if they were all wasps? That would be normal for them to eat a caterpillar man. Okay, so then the idea of the portal. Uh, so the portal, obviously, it's like before we could even really conceive of how to make like locomotive energy, we could conceive of like wanting to go from one place to another. And the way that this symbol or this like mechanism is treated in the show, I think, is pretty interesting because they have a different set of technology for each like group that goes to each different place. So there's like intergalactic travel portals that are different from portals that the US government uses. And then there's like independent creators who are making their own portals, and it's like they're the most likely to be seen like malfunctioning. And it's like every Rick to be a Rick kind of has a relationship to making portals. So that's like I assuming sort of a rite of passage. Like you have to be able to get from one place to another. You have to be able to like use technology to like move in the world and get somewhere, not like be oppressed by it, but you have to like ride it. um and there's levels where there's like this joke about how the United States government sucks at making technology, so they have to call in a Rick to help them, but they also hate this individual and want to put control on them, and that like infuriated by that sort of tension and that reality of how power functions in this universe. Um, but yeah, and then let's see. Oh yeah, I don't know. Everybody gets a portal. And then there's the idea of cosmism that I think a lot of people latch on to. Like the cosmic horror genre has been really influential to people who I think feel like the world is outside of their grasp and the universe is bigger than anything that we could possibly control. And there is like a really strong feeling of like, it's like the Earthrise photo, how that's like, oh, I feel totally insignificant in the universe. I don't even exist. And yet I'm like stuck here experiencing things and trying and striving. And um, so yeah, I just threw in a few things here that um, like Fire in the Sky is a movie that gets referenced in the series. It's like alien abduction is a big thing, like going, interstellar, interplanetary horrors that occur. And like, of course, like Lovecraft is the problematic kernel to all these things. But then Terror Vision is also like sort of a flip side, funnier reference that gets worked into the series a lot. And Terror Vision is like the idea that these aliens sort of like come in through the TV signals and they kill all the parents, and like it's an 80s wacky adventure. But a lot of the practical effects get replicated through like monster design. And then there's like the time that Rick and Morty Cronenberg the world. And then there's the idea that like there's a bunch of floating heads that are judging whether or not we should live as a planet, which kind of goes back to that idea of the early like voting, like the voters, the viewers, the audience will decide if you live and die. um okay, so this was like early days, I don't know. They kind of mint a whole bunch more characters. They take pot shots at like the fantasies that I think are, I mean, I don't know. I love it. I loved the Purge episode where they go to a purge planet and then help the locals to massacre the ruling class. Like that is enjoyable television. It's just fun. But then, they also have uh interdimensional cable, which is like, I don't think that they would have been able to get away with having interdimensional cable if there wasn't an Adult Swim ethos that had developed so strongly as to like accept this randomness. But it really like condensed um everything that you could say about like shitty mashups of things and like, fake TV commercials, like fake reality shows. And yeah, it's like they really touched on not only like these deep feelings of like how hard it is just to be a person and know that you can do some things and you know that you want to do some things and know that you're like in this universe that doesn't give a fuck. And then also that there's like these TV tropes and these movie tropes that we keep living through, and that like we're not really able to get to like a direct sense of what it means to like live as an individual. So we are just like a part of this media conglomerate mush. um All right. Well, anyway, so everybody's vibing, everybody's into it. And then boom, we hit April Fool's Szechuan sauce debacle. Holy shit. We didn't have any idea how big this could possibly be. Um, so this was like the April Fool's Day prank in 2017 was that Rick and Morty would put out their third season premiere and not announce it at all, just have it playing and just see who freaked out about it. And so it was like, I remember getting the message. I'm like, okay, we have to like watch this right fucking now. Like this is happening. It's like a meeting, everybody has to show up. um so there's this feeling of like, oh, there's this clandestine thing, we're all like texting each other, and the cliffhanger was that like Rick is in prison. He's in the most like high security prison in the galaxy or whatever. And it's like the premiere is like him getting out. So everyone's like, well, fuck, oh my god, it's April Fool's. He's getting out of prison. How's he gonna do it? What's gonna happen? And then it opens in this scene where like this agent is just asking him to recall his memories, and he remembers Szechuan sauce. He fucking wants some Szechuan sauce. And this was like his way of fucking with someone that is trying to torture information out of him. So there was this like, it was partly about the Szechuan sauce, but it was also partly about being like, fuck you, you can't control my brain. I'm just gonna start talking about Szechuan sauce and you're gonna think I'm crazy, but then you can't get in my head. I mean, that at least was what was happening in the cartoon. This blew up into people, like hundreds and hundreds of people, uh, all across the world of McDonald's, storming locations, demanding Szechuan sauce, and then McDonald's offering to produce it because of their demand, and then they didn't make enough, so fans went ape shit. And like I mean, I guess most famously in Los Angeles there was like a big kind of uh kerfuffle with the LAPD. And then there was the No More Szechuan Sauce guy who became viral for like totally tweaking. And yeah, I mean, to me, in my view, like watching these artists work to like hone what was like addictive about their comedy through like years and years of putting themselves into this like voting model, and then getting to this point where they're like, oh, let's see, like, let's communicate with our fans on this seemingly basic level, and then like having that turn into um the basis of like an actual like aggressive move against a giant corporation. Like that's amazing to me that so many like imagine if it wasn't Szechuan sauce. Imagine if it was like, hey, we just want to actually take McDonald's apart brick by brick. Like these people could do it because there's so many of them. And just like seeing people mobilize for something like that and then like go attack a target and like be exact. Like, I don't experience that a lot with watching cartoons or any other kind of show. Like, everyone says that a lot of shows are great, but would you go out and like storm anything for a cartoon? It's very strong love. um, and then this gets to Rick and Morty 100 years. Now, most recently, since then, the appreciation for the Rick and Morty show has dissipated a lot. You can see, like, after Fascist Morty, stop asking questions, just have fun. Um, you know, a little bit kind of got lost in the making. Um, and I have my theories as to why. Because after the Szechuan sauce debacle, the show got a huge order of episodes. So I think now they're like working through 70 episodes. And they increased their writers' room and they increased their directors. All of the directors for this most recent season are completely different than the first season directors and first season writers. Like, first season, you can see, like, you know, Justin and Dan are writing things together, they're directing things together, and by this season, they don't have credits on any of it. Um, and I think that that really shows because the episodes are kind of turning into a referential thing where they're like, sure, they're still talking about what would it mean to be one of many, or like, what does it mean to be a clone, or whatever? What does it mean to be a family? What does it mean to be in the universe? And what does it mean to be dealing with franchise? But now it sort of is like, okay, Morty is a Kira boy, or like, haha, now they're hanging out in a Cenobite bar. Like, it's just a little more formulaic and has lost that surprise that came from people like plumbing their own experience. um, so Dan Harmon is still involved in like show running for Rick and Morty, but you can see like Justin Roiland has moved on to set up a video game studio, and you can see like a lot of the art style transfers over, and you can see like a lot of his humor. His studio is called Squanch Games now, but it used to be called Squanch Tendo, and Nintendo, of course, like fucking came after them because you can't put Tendo in your name, so they're just Squanch now. And it kind of like harkens back to the House of Cosby's thing, where it's like, what are you gonna do? Like, I'm just gonna be your, oh, I'm doing your thing. But yeah, so he's like exploring with VR, making more of these worlds that are about like the banality becoming this like insane thing. Like, Accounting Plus is really just about like going through this weird hell world, and Trover is like, oh, I mean, to me, I feel like Trover is a commentary on Death Stranding, but I haven't seen, like, I don't know. That I'm just making that up. Anyway, and then something kind of cool. The animators who did like Adult Swim, like animators who worked on Rick and Morty, and then the Solar Opposites studio, like they're all like putting in to join IATSE Local 839. And I mean, this is like pretty new news. I don't know. This was like last month. They put the announcement out, so it's, I don't know. It's kind of cool to see like that they have the structure in place now, because they started out really like just a bunch of crazies like in their living room making shit, and now like all the workers who are in their show are like building a structure. Pretty cool to me. And then here's like the last thing, very controversial. Sorry, my talk's so long. Um, the art. Justin Roiland has been selling things at auction. He sold this painting at Sotheby's, and then he's like also selling the NFTs, and it's like everybody's extremely mad. But he made millions of dollars, and he donated like a third of it to like the organizations that help homeless people around Los Angeles. So he's like kind of getting more into that side of making money, and running his game company. And that's the flow so far of these art groups and this product that I admire so greatly. Thank you all for going on this journey, and good night.
Yay.
Whoa, that was it.
That was great. I definitely that made me think a lot about, I think it's very true for like things that are not franchises, like, you know, when things don't release several titles, but it's more like, you know, long running TV series or long running cartoons, the material conditions and like the context and the culture around the, like where it gets produced is forgotten a lot of when it comes to criticizing, because, you know, there's so many examples like from The Simpsons to, I don't know, like Grey's Anatomy, like where shows radically change because they just keep running so long. But that never really gets discussed. Like at first, they would just go with like a reputation that, oh, this is bad, or like this was good and then it got bad. But there's never like any talks about how it actually changes. And so it's interesting to see like, because I have seen like 2-3 episodes of Rick and Morty, so I don't know much about it, but to see where it starts from, like that artist statement for Channel 101, like that's a really cool statement, and you can definitely see through another lens how that show came to be. But because of the incidents, like especially if you don't watch, like I was one that, like my impressions were mostly from the sauce thing and from like, oh, you know, Elon Musk loves this show, like shit like that.
Oh yeah, I
So
forgot to mention the Musk man.
yeah,
Fuck.
it's very easy to create this idea of it, which might be true for some episodes or not, but you can even go deeper and just go like, yeah, episodes are done by different people. So like you can have cool things happening, shitty shows, like because there's like a small run. I mean, it's what happens to comic books. Like most comic books suck, but there's like, oh, you should read this run of Batman or this run of like, I don't know, Captain America. But when it comes to like these like monolithical shows, you don't get that chance, it seems to me. Like it's way easier to just like condense them into like, oh, okay, this is either great or is this garbage? Because for example, like a show I was really into called Lost, it changed completely a bunch of times, and there are certainly stretches where it's like it's really good, or it's like it's fun but it's bad, or it's just straight up garbage. But then people just talk about the fucking end as if that's like the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That I'm thinking a lot about that because this definitely makes me think about like the show in a different light.
Well, I guess I'm thinking right too, like the idea of like, can you have like the like your head canon version of like, right, like you're just gonna pick out the good episodes, right? Like, or like Lucia, if you were to like recommend this show to us, right, and be like, here's an episode, like 5 episodes to watch, right? You wouldn't be like, watch the first 5 episodes and you're gonna like be hooked. I mean, maybe that's the case with this show because you said that you really like the first 5, the beginning of the series, but like,
Yeah.
right, like because it isn't something that like seems as like serialized, right, where like you need to watch this episode to understand what happens in the next episode, like there's a little bit more freedom for like the viewer to like, I don't know, come up with, right, like the head canon, and then also like what is the adopted like I was like recently heard this term recently, but like, right, like the fanon, where like it's the fan canon, where like fans then, right, like adopt a canon that is maybe different than what like the creators intended, but like, right, like as a fan base, like as the consumers of like of culture, like they're kind of the ones that at the end of the day like get to determine like how we interpret a thing, and that comes around with like shipping culture and like all those like various other things, like, oh no, like these two people are actually gay, like don't listen to the creators, like this is literally like like what, like we all know it, and stuff like, and that's, I don't know, I guess, yeah, as someone who also has never watched Rick and Morty, like it is very interesting to see, like, I don't know, like, but has been tangentially aware also of like, yeah, like Dan Harmon's a drunk, right? Like Chevy Chase was horrible on Community, like, like all these like random things that pop up, that like this was an outlet for people to like be artists and like actually make a living, while also like
Yeah.
having it be like a dumping ground for like the hard questions that we're all asking, and also probably for them to be shitty at times.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and the fanon thing you're mentioning does exist. Like it's very common for shows that like Star Trek shows, for example. It's like very common to have like, oh, this is a guide of like the episodes that matter for the like the overall plot, so you don't have to watch the
Mm-hmm.
filler, or like
Yeah.
anime when there's like
Yeah.
20 seasons of filler, like this is are the plot ones.
Yeah, or like I'm
uh
always so familiar with like the idea of like what's the like, right, like the fan order of like how you should watch Star Wars, right? Like that's
right.
like a really common one. Like, do you watch four through six, then one through three? Really, you should watch like, right, or like the proposal that like you should watch like four, five, but then watch one, two, three,
Oh my god.
then six, because then you get like the true arc of like Darth Vader is like, and like what's the argument of like, well, the way you consume the order in which you consume this like changes how you're going to perceive the thing
Yeah.
because it's episodic.
I think like what's interesting, yeah, it's interesting about this show because like they it's like from the very beginning they had this idea of a fan base in mind, and like there was so many moments where I mean like so like Justin Roiland is ha- like upper middle class family, like California vineyards, like having a nice time. But then like Dan Harmon was from like working class. From I think he's from Wisconsin. He's from
Yeah,
yeah.
he's from Milwaukee.
Yeah, and he just had like a horrible time getting the shit kicked out of him by life, and was like super just like had just a trash time, and then like brought himself up like, and then became a guy who had a show, and like, but it was through like building an audience that vouched also for him to go back on the show. And like there was so many things that, like him getting kicked out of Community, and then like if he didn't get invited back on, who knows if he would have been able to maintain those like working connections that would have gotten him to like have a conversation with Mike Lazo. And it's just like because he doesn't have the ability to just like sit and be like, okay, whatever, like I'll just wait until my next script hits or something. It's like, fuck, dude, I gotta go. Like, where's my fans at? And then they all just like, but like, no, put him back. And then there's all these other people that you hear that are like, he's crazy and abusive. And then there's these people who are like, yeah, but his writing is good. And it's like, oh, that's complicated. Like, I don't know. There's that too. It's like the fan, because there's the fan canon. I think in this case, there's so many like super fans that would be like, oh, everything's amazing, and I like love it, and they love going like through the history and stuff. But then for me, I'm more like, no, 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 no. There's like good ones where you actually see the world that they're trying to build, and then like the kind of the resonance that they can have with the characters. But I don't know. Just just trying to get everybody to watch it now that it's like over as a thing.
At the part where it was the TV 101 where they were doing those screenings, so that was a screenings situation where all the people who were voting were creators too, or was it a bigger audience than that?
So they like had a uh they had like started in a living room, and then they just were like, "Oh, what do we make?" And then when they put it online, they were like, "Audience can just vote."
Hmm. I thought that was very interesting because when the schema is laid out, I think of it as like the worst recipe for pap, like the audience votes the thing to the top, but it turned out to work. It's like maybe it's because of the kind of things that they created in the audience that they cultivated was one that wanted to kind of refine it in a more interesting direction or something. But trusting audience votes to determine direction is really it's a weird art tack to take, and maybe it's kind of connected to how the whole ethos of, your place in the universe is so precarious, and they like that or something. But it's really interesting to me how that ended up working out for them.
Yeah. And how that ended up working out, like how it's like how Justin Roiland kept getting voted, like upvoted for the whole thing. Like for Channel 101, his shows were like the highest ranked, and also then when they moved on to acceptable TV, like when VH1 let them have a platform for this voting model, like he he was the only one to span the whole run of the show. And it was like out of people who were all like, all of them are super funny, but just that like like who was picking this? It's cool. It's very like, I don't know. It's like maybe it was all rigged, or maybe it was like meant to be or something. I don't know. Because also, if like House of Cosby's didn't get canceled, then maybe like there wouldn't be a Doc and Marty.
Yeah, it's like there's something about the Szechuan stuff which I wasn't really aware of, but I mean I've heard of it after the fact and stuff. But what that audience wants. I mean, they like, they support the show and they did what the show told them to, but they also had to have their own motives, like wanting to like smash something or wanting to freak out, you know, and just an attraction to like some kind of, I don't know, I think the sensibility, you know, it's obviously linked, but I don't know. It's like the desire to go freak out by McDonald's and the attraction to the theme of, you know, the themes of the show seem kind of, I mean, obviously they're, I don't know what I'm talking about.
I mean, it makes sense to me. Like, I've definitely wanted to freak out in a McDonald's just because it's like this place is horrible. Like, it's all horrible. Like, why, you know, why treat it like it's nice? And like, why isn't everybody freaking out all the time everywhere? Like, it's just because
Yeah,
we're like in it.
it's interesting how, I mean, maybe the thing that refreshes people is how, you know, it takes a certain kind of, I don't know what to relate to that question, you know, like most of the time the that level of anxiety doesn't get addressed, you know, that the universe hates you and is meaningless or something, you know, it's,
Yeah,
and like
it's like, oh, don't think about it though.
yeah, but like once you kind of pick at it a little bit, it gets compelling and you want more and more exploration of it.
Because mostly I think it's like we're all expected to just be relating to each other on a social level that's like, oh, you don't step out of line because people will just be mad at you. And then it's like, but what if you do? What if you do somehow? Is it even possible to do that? And then you like the further outside you step, you realize there's even more outside to go. And this sort of was like the space exploration element of it is like, oh man, I went outside and I thought I was a genius, but there's actually people who are just like me. And but then I met them, but then also I'm like, what else is there?
Yeah, the the presentation I want to do in like a few weeks is kind of about, it's my youth music scene, and it was like, you know, it's so funny to look back on it because it's so transparently contained within things that, you know, are so limited, and it's like it's almost embarrassing to, well, it's not almost embarrassing, it's hugely embarrassing to kind of like um witness that.
Were you guys all like, we're so punk?
Well, I mean, it was that, it was also like the the things that, I mean, everything is defined in opposition to other things, you know, like, well, we're this, but we're like not the football or whatever like that. But when you put them side by side, it's almost like there's corresponding things. It's like, uh, you know, it's the same thing inverted or something. But so it's like that's, there's so many, there's so many instances of like where you try, it's like you're trying to you see that limit and then you try to transcend it, and the act of trying to transcend it makes it even more clear that you're completely trapped in it.
Yeah. And I just like, I think it's interesting to like let that be a part of what we're doing when we're like working on organizing and stuff. So it's like, you know, a lot of people who are like leftists are, or whatever, they're like leftists, is like we're all just fucking neoliberal subjects. Like we're all just in this shit. But then there's people who are like, but I'm this, and Rick and Morty is evil because it's about the individual, and this fucking guy thinks he can do things, and it's like really, really intense to watch people get like mad at that. And I'm like not really connect that maybe that could be us, like trying to do something different, trying to make it, trying to like build a world that's habitable for us, not like, I don't know. it's just, but then just to realize like the bubble that you're in, and then the bubble that's outside of that bubble, and then like how then you see people in different bubbles. You're like, oh, I thought we were just, well, never mind.
Yeah, yeah, it goes back to the William Morris attempts to, it's like we're gonna make a factory that's not a factory, but
Yeah.
it's like we just keep getting pulled back, and then that's really disheartening. But it's kind of like uh it's such a consistent result that you have to come up with some way to deal with it other than, you know, be sad about it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess not to like turn this into like the conversation about like where are spaces for like white men, but like you talking about like a music, like you're wanting to present on your music scene, right, that you had. And like I was just like looking at the programming of Adult Swim, which is, like just the listing of it is like a channel that or like a block of programming that I haven't engaged with in a very long time. And just like the things that do exist on it, right? Like you had like Tyler, you had like Odd Futures, like Loiter Squad. You have like all these things that seem like such like touchstones of like, I don't know, just like white dudes on the internet, like as like and like the ways in which like they feel represented or something that like can be connected to. And that's just like, I don't know. This is something that I guess I'm thinking about. Not that we need to turn this into that conversation, but
It definitely is a part of it because like the show got a lot of flack because of they they're like catering to the Adult Swim audience, which like also Mike Lazo openly was like, oh, we don't have any women led shows or like queer led shows or anything because people can't handle conflict in comedy unless they're a white man. um, which was like a really special thing to hear. Um, and of course, like a lot of people responded to that, and uh, like the Rick and Morty writing room changed a lot because of it as well.
mhm.
So they reached like some level of like a pretty diverse mix, but also like their show started as two white dudes, and like it was total like bro mafia, and like you can't avoid that.
Yeah. Well, and also I think I'm just thinking about it because like how much attention is currently being put on Florida's law that is currently circulating
Totally.
in Disney's backing, and like like shamefully like how little attention is being put towards like Texas's law, but like with like Disney being culpable, right, and like these like queer creators and stuff, and like every like the CEO of Disney like getting on stage and being like just like listing the shows and movies that they put out and being like, this speaks more than any lobbying dollars we could ever contribute. And like this like like what the differences are between thinking about like an Adult Swim programming block on a random night, and then like the ways in which like Disney as like the other major source of like animation, right, aimed at like a slightly younger audience by a handful of years maybe, but like but also like really the only place that you can like be an animator, right? And like creators and stuff coming out with statements being like, I'm done like like queer washing like Disney and all that stuff. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, because it's like it. I mean, Disney kind of, I feel like, prides itself on responding to like representation in
Hmm.
ways that are totally surface and
Hmm.
that like end up being really appropriative, and then like they ultimately are just like a corporation that is gonna exists on it, like whatever like terms it needs to keep making
Well,
money for.
well, yeah, and I guess it's also like the thought a bit about like what the intended audience is, right? Like I just went to a conference that was like full of Disney adults, which was like miserable. But like but right, like Disney is aimed at, you know, you can identify as like children, right?
Yeah.
Where like when you think of Adult Swim, you are thinking more of like teenagers.
Yeah.
Like, right? Like you're watching anime for the first time. Isn't this cool? Like, oh, like, you know, like I just remember like watching like Toonami growing up and being like, ooh, like this is so cool. Like I live in the suburbs, but like this is something I've never encountered before. And
Yeah.
like and like, you know, like what is that intended audience allow for some amount of like what the program, like what is happening in the shows, right? Like existential questions about like what am I doing, right? Oh damn, I'm just the butter serving robot, right? Like
Yeah.
and like oh wow, I'm 17 and I'm like serve food, you know, like I'm a waiter at like a like, you know, like at a diner. Am
Yeah,
I
like,
just
oh shit, I
yeah,
served
like
somebody butter the other day.
yeah,
Fuck,
like
who am I?
yeah, like it's definitely aimed at like the I don't know, like the growing, like moldable, like young adult mind that is just trying to understand what it like has enough knowledge to know that they like exist, but like trying to understand like what does it mean to exist and like how do they fit into everything.
Yeah. I think like the political questions that the show brings up is kind of interesting too, because there's like this element of like, you know, there's like the episode of examining like what happens when you just well, you know, what happens when you just mow down the ruling class of a planet. It feels good, and then everyone is like, all right, cool, what do we do now? Oh shit. um then there's like there's an example of in one episode they hack like into there's like a central bank that has, it's really stupid, it's just a cartoon, but like in the central bank they just have a screen that says like one blemfart flark equals one, you know,
Hmm.
blemflark, but then they just change it to mean like one of this currency equals zero. So and then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh fuck, money doesn't, there's money has no value. I literally cannot do anything on this planet anymore. Like, and then just like the Flubel Crank episode where they're like, oh, how do we like produce energy on this scale? It's like, oh well, we'll get people to make energy and we'll just take a little bit of the extra. And then they keep asking like, well, isn't that just like slavery with extra steps, this like extractive economy we're building for energy? And it's just like a cool way to introduce these ideas that I think like nobody really points to it as like, this is really, this is good. Like everyone just goes like, oh, it's nihilistic. It's like, well, I mean, if you want to see it all like as a hopeless thing, but they're also trying to be like, what if you center yourself in these moments where you can relate? Like, is it, I mean, does that, are you nihilistic? I mean, I don't think so. I just feel like sometimes I am in these moments where I'm like, shit, yeah, working is just slavery with extra steps. Like, uh, what now? Oh, I guess I should watch some TV because it's bedtime. Like, this is the world we
Hmm.
live in. It's funny to laugh at it because you can get a little distance. I don't know. Just trying to shine the shine the shit.
Um, Annabelle's really obsessed with how this one Star Wars cartoon like touches on like the early Iraq War Things as like a war cartoon uh, made in like early like 2001, 2008 or whatever. Um, and I'm just thinking about how like Rick and Morty is also kind of like this ability, like how you can talk about political things in like a popular scale and like a post like 9/11 era, which isn't really a demarker of anything. But like the 2010s, where it's like there's less like strong like cultural like wall into like this kind of like, well, what are we supposed to say about this kind of time? There's no like national projects.
Yeah, I think it's like especially telling that they made like an Obama guy as the president for the whole show. So he's always like, "Hey, I'm the president," and then he just wants to like bomb somebody or like he's like send a drone.
Yeah, there's like the I've watched a lot of it recently, but like the government is like the galactic government is like this like meaningless huge bureaucracy that just like commits random violence. And then you have the US government where like the ongoing joke is that he drone strikes for his insecurities. Um, I feel like yeah, it's like something about like how like the government's crimes have been just kind of like so overwhelming, but just like kind of everywhere, and there's not like any type of sense of what you're supposed to like do about it.
Yeah. Just like enjoy when it's not happening.
Yeah.
To bring it back to Disney, they rebooted The Proud Family, and I think it just premiered recently. And there was just an episode where like the shitty like ginger girl who always honestly sucked on the original show, but she's running to be like high school class president or something, and she specifically like and like notedly doesn't stick up for a student who has like gay parents because like she can't take that heat, like she has to be like neutral to win the president race or whatever.
Oh, what?
And that like just happened. I mean, that's something her character would do because her character sucks, but they timed that really
very well.
very wildly with the current happenings at Disney and in general.
Shit.
But yeah.
Can I have like a quick summary of what's happening at Disney? I don't know anything about this.
Oh, it's just that like Disney obviously is a corporation, like backs politicians of all stripes, and people are mad that there's the law going through the Florida legislature that I don't know what it's actually called, but basically like it just comes down to like the standard like we're gonna try to like limit what you can say to our children in schools. Like around what like to keep people comfortable.
It's like you can't teach about gender or whatever, right?
Yeah, or
like gender or sexuality of like any kind.
So
Yeah.
and right, and so then people are like, "Wow, look it, we have the receipts. Disney's fucking horrible because look it, they donated $200,000 to these random candidates that now live in or that now work in the Florida legislature and are the ones that voted yes on this and introduced this bill."
Well, yeah, but it's also that like literally the day that it was uncovered or whatever, this like the CEO.
Yeah,
like,
but it's not like being uncovered. Like that's like.
Well, sure, like not uncovered. I'm just saying that like the day that everyone was mad about it, the CEO like sends out a memo or has like a meeting, and he's like, you guys, like, all the thing we make stories at Disney, and that's how much more important. And everything else, like the stuff that you do, like we're making stories, and that matters so much more. And that's what pushed people over the edge, because obviously Disney, like every corporation, has always donated money to like bad things, because all corporations are doing that. Like, but they were very, and I mean, I don't
But
know.
then there's like creators like that produce content for Disney that have come out specifically and like been like, I'm gonna have a live stream to fundraise money, like because I have this show that's on Disney Plus now that's like explicitly queer, and like I'm done with Disney like uplifting my show as like good representation and good whatever, like while also doing this. But it's just like, it's all like this the way that like it's like, like Disney, you had your first black princess in like 2010 or whatever, like it's just like none of the critiques are necessarily new. It's just like a, another round of the standard critique of you put out content that people consume and enjoy, but at the same time like you're doing business, and
Yeah.
well
Like Disney's so fucking amoral anyway.
well
Like,
yeah, exactly. And I guess like that's like the thing that I find like really interesting like about Rick and Morty, or like Adult Swim is a thing, because not that Adult Swim like doesn't have politics, right?
Well,
It's like
Cartoon
part of,
Network nerfed
well as
Steven
like
Universe.
as like
So
part of like Viacom, right? Like, but like at the same time, like, right, they found a market demographic, right, that they were able to like create, like to
which is white guys on the internet.
well, yeah. Well, I'm not saying that it's like a good thing, but I'm just saying that like, right, like they identified a demographic and like have created like have supported creators and such to like, I don't know, like, right, like make money off of all of these shows like Eric Andre, like, like all of this
yeah.
random stuff, but also like supporting really weird like shit that doesn't seem to fit in the demo. Like I don't
Yeah.
know, Joe Pera
Yeah,
talks with you is
it made
not Eric
it created a
Andre. Like,
subculture. Like there's a whole subculture that honestly goes even beyond Adult Swim. If you think about it, like they were kind of one of the entities that made lo-fi hip hop exist by like
yeah.
having Flying Lotus and the like to the bumpers for it and like all
I
that
mean,
style.
100%.
Yeah, and like they like now like there was this show that's getting popular like Smiley and Friends, that it's like a bunch of people that used to do Newgrounds Flash animation just doing basically the same shit, but now it's like a 10-minute episode cartoon. So it ends up like carrying on a lot of like parts of other cultures and like absorbing into it and creating like this aesthetic, which is pretty rare. Like you used to have like Hanna-Barbera, but now like there's no Cartoon Network aesthetic or like Nickelodeon aesthetic anymore, right?
Yeah, it's like the thing that kind of survived from the era of programming where like Adult Swim was able to make it onto the internet, whereas like Nickelodeon as a thing or like Cartoon Network as a thing, like their daytime programming all just sort of like blended together and got lost. Like it's just cool to see that Adult Swim was this, even like as its the whole entirety was something that came together on a shoestring budget from people who, like, of course, yeah, they're like dudes who are white and they made it into this place to do the thing that they're doing, but they also had this like economic thing that was like impossible to get through. Like, how are we going to make entertainment in a world where Disney exists? Like, how are we going to make this thing? They were given the shittiest spots. Like, okay, you guys, like, go and make a name for yourself in the middle of the night. Like, go and do it with no money. And then, like, just maybe we'll keep you, maybe we won't. So every single time you do it, you have to win. Like, it's kind of crazy. And then like their response to it was just to go so lo-fi with everything and just be like, yeah, the animation is shitty because people can relate to that. And then it's also easier for them to participate as fans. Like, it's like you see so many just like, I don't know. It's like there was like galleries of people who were doing Rick and Morty art. And like it's cool. I don't know. It's just people are so like they love it so much, and it's like really shitty easy to do designs. But I mean, so is everything else. Like Adult Swim, like 12-ounce mouse was the crappiest thing I've ever seen. It was amazing.
Or even like Robot Chicken, right? Like you have toys in your closet, like stop animation them. And like
Yeah.
you can see yourself doing that.
Yeah. It's just like, and then it's a way, it sort of was like how we were looking at the Spider-Man Elsa videos where it's like, oh, do you feel oppressed by all of these major corporate um figures? Like, why don't you just take them and make them smash through each other? It's just like make them do something you want them to do. Yeah.
Might be a little disjointed, but I remember like when I was young trying to engage with Adult Swim, but I wonder from like a queer teenage perspective, like the existential questions or something did seem really straight to me, whereas something like, like Mulan by Disney or something, sort of the melodrama or something kind of connected more with my experience. I don't know if that's interesting. But anyway.
Yeah, I definitely could see something like that. Like Disney kind of, if the target audience of Cartoon Network, or I mean, whatever, Adult Swim is like the white guy online that is probably straight, then like the Disney demographic is a lot more like feminine or like, I mean,
Well, yeah, it's
queer,
like
even though it's
girl. Like
not
it's
queer.
I mean it's girls. Like there aren't Disney princes. There's Disney princesses.
Well, yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah.
Well, but I
I'm
guess
just
maybe not even like masculine, feminine, but like
Well,
philosophical or like Apollonian versus like just like I feel like as like a queer teenager, you have like such huge emotions, like something like Adult Swim wasn't necessarily like reflecting on like existential or political issues wasn't quite capturing my experience at the time, maybe.
well, and even like I just saw something the other day, like about like how The Little Mermaid is like quintessentially like a queer story, not just because it is, but also like the original subject matter was literally like written by a gay man, and then it was like remastered for Disney by like another gay man. Like it's not like, even if Disney is like, yeah, everyone's straight, nothing is gay, like the people creating it still are gonna like get that through, like, I don't know.
Yeah, from like a gay perspective, maybe it's like, well, of course all these political or philosophical issues exist, but like Disney's giving me something like fabulous or something like like I don't know, like it's sort of beside the point. Like especially from like a young queer perspective, some of the issues maybe seem so unresolvable. I just want like, someone belting a ballad or
well,
something is
Yeah.
yeah, well, and that might come down to some of like the production, right? That like
right.
Disney being as like huge as it
Well,
is,
right,
like
they
you have
have
a
like the resources,
yeah,
but
you literally have a single scene that takes animators months because they are literally sketching out background dancers. like in Under the Sea.
Well,
Like, you know,
sure. But I don't know. Just like, yeah, I think there are a lot of I don't know. Like Hercules is another good example of like, there's literally a whole ballad about like literally going to the ends of the earth to find a place to belong.
Right. Or like Mulan, Reflection.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I don't know. I mean, but right, obviously infinite resources. Like
well,
it's
no,
a
I
Right,
was
thing.
okay.
just saying, I was just saying that, like, talking about like the pomp and circumstance, that like you literally have numbers that, like, rather than like shitty hand or animation that like people are doing fan art of, you like you can do fan art, I guess, of Little Mermaid, but like Under the Sea is like,
Well, yeah, but you could have like a super shitty animation like Queer Story. Like that can't. It's not that that can't exist.
I guess the kind of thing that I liked about these shows was that like it was a relief from gender, like
Hmm.
because I feel like for me, my experience of like trying to figure out stuff, I'm like I kind of give up a lot of the time. I'm like I don't really know, like this sort of just feels like I can spend my whole life like just kind of like getting into like things that I will never know. And then I just want to see something that is like a joke that is crazy, like a guy who has ants in his eyes. I know, just like, he has ants in his eyes. What? That's crazy. What? Like, that for me is like a relief and just like feels like, oh, thank God, this just doesn't have to do with like what I'm wearing or how I look or how my looks are gonna be tied to what I do or what I am. It's like that guy just has fucking ants in his eyes. That sucks.
I mean, that's fair.
Literally,
I
I'm like, yes.
I definitely like. I mean, I think I only saw Rick and Morty through where it like got canceled the first time. I don't know if that was pre Szechuan sauce or like right after. I
So
don't
it was
know.
like, yeah, there's been so many cancels.
And I
If
didn't mean to like it, I didn't purposefully not keep watching it. Like I was enjoying it. It just, there was time and whatever. But yeah, no, like I definitely have felt that I'm able to relate a lot to that too. I'm just out here being like Disney isn't just for children.
oh, I
Um,
mean, hey,
and I
like
mean Disney adults like
no, it isn't.
generally
It
are
isn't
annoying
that
though.
Disney
I'm saying
isn't
that too.
just for
But
children,
just
but
that like
that is the intended audience.
well, I mean I disagree with that, which is okay. And you
no,
also
it's
like
like
aren't a
it's
Disney
like
person.
family friendly entertainment, right? It's supposed to be like the whole family can get into it and
Well,
everybody
yes.
can feel something from it and it's beautiful and it's big and it's romantic and it's
Yeah.
like
I mean
all
it's obviously
stolen.
more like child friendly than something called like Adult Swim. Like, but I don't know.
Yeah, Adult
Um,
Swim's like trying to be edgy.
Well, and I
um,
like my first experiences of Adult Swim were definitely, I mean, like I don't know, everyone's where you fall asleep watching like a cartoon that is for kids, and then you wake up and that fucking like what's it called with like the weird like superhero guy, not the one with the bird, not Birdman, but the other one having like a weird cartoon late night show, and it's
Space
like
Ghost,
Space
Coast to
Ghost.
yes,
Coast.
Space Ghost, and it's like wait, what is this? Like did I transport into another world? Also, this is definitely not for kids, but I'm watching it.
It's funny that the name Adult Swim, like in real life at a swimming pool where the Adult Swim
That's
happens, is
true.
like the most staid. It's like everything's going insane, and then it's Adult Swim, and like nothing happens.
Yeah, yeah,
That's super
yeah.
fun.
It's where it's like the quietest.
It's like one person doing a laps, like you can hear their arms slapping the water surface.
And all the kids are just sitting there like, oh, let me in.
I was oh, on like the Disney like being appealing to queer teenagers. I feel like we've always found like, well, like I was thinking about how Rick and Morty I don't think has had like man in a dress punch in it yet. as far as I've seen. But then there's like this level of like the edgy men in a dress thing, which I personally find much more palatable than the like Disney, like it's in a wholesome like setting, and then there's the like tranny punch. Like um like I'm pretty sure it's in Mulan and probably most of the other ones where it's like, haha, isn't it funny that this person is doing uh like a gender thing? And then in like Always Sunny, there's like the part where about Carmen being a trans woman and she gets like punched in the face the first episode she's in. But I'm like, Carmen's great. She's Odin, her thick, great for her, love her. And then Rick and Morty, where it's like, wow, you have it like the gender in this is like too dumb and like so like underplayed, where it's like there's just boys being dudes, and I don't have to think about gender really at all in a
It's kind of like they make what I was thinking about, like the punch like joke, or like the like kick in the nuts joke or something. There's like they did one joke that was like a guy who is made out of gears, and then the joke is that they like don't understand the anatomy of someone who has like gears, like it's just made out of gears. And then they like, but then they make a joke of like taking a gear and putting it in a different place, and then people being like, dude, that's so fucked up, oh my god, and like throwing up because in their world it's like someone just had their balls ripped off and put in their mouth. But it's just like, it's just a very like stupid, it's stupid, but it's like, oh, what would it look like on another planet? Like, what's a body like anyway? I don't know. For me, it just helped. Like, my brain is just like that. I'm like, oh, thank God. Oh, like, I think of myself as a 12-year-old boy. Um, and then I really connect to that.
Mhm.
But yeah, everybody doesn't have to like it. um, any last words? Cool. Fuck Ronald Reagan.